number of ballots, valid ballots, are still being counted. Some races are undecided across the United States. And I just think there is something we all need right now during this process. We all need a good, healthy dose of patience.
And those are the words of your newly elected third-term governor. Haven't had one of those in more than 40 years. It's Jay Inslee extolling the virtue of patience in the days after election 2020. We are recording the show as former Vice President Joe Biden appears to have the votes he needs to win the presidency, but he's facing a series of legal challenges from President Trump. So we're going to put a little national, little local politics in the mix, add a dollop of cream, a spoonful of understanding, because that's the way we do it on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your Seattle area political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own, and I am joined by my co-host, faster than a speeding bullet, stronger than a locomotive, able to leap at least two-story duplexes in a single bound. That's Kevin Schofield of Seattle City Council Insight. Hello, Kevin.
Hey, 3 stories on a really good day, but you know, this is not a really good day. So
I'll pace yourself. Pace yourself.
If I can get over my, my step stool.
Yes, that's an accomplishment. Okay yeah. All right. We give thanks also to City Grind Espresso. They're the background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. They, of course, the coffee stand on the first floor of Seattle City Hall, closed during the pandemic, but they're still open for takeout at their Henry Art Gallery location. Please support local businesses, people. We also thank our patrons who support us on Patreon. And if you're listening to this, hey, a few bucks a month is really all it takes. And we do need your help to keep this enterprise afloat. So if you support local independent journalism, so important during these times, please consider giving to us at Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. And finally, a big thanks to Converge Media for airing the video version of this podcast. All right, we're going to go in full throttle on right here, right now. So we're going to tackle a big milestone ahead for the Seattle City Council's budget process in a minute, but I want to start, Kevin, with some reactions to the election. In the race for president, a legal battle I know ahead for President Trump, which I think we all expected here. But I will say, in looking at a lot of these battleground states, Trump's efforts to say, hey, everybody, don't vote by mail, don't vote by mail. It appears his supporters might not have voted by mail, but Biden voters, a lot of them did. And as we see these mail-in ballots start to come in later, they get tallied up in these later counts in a number of these races, but not all of them. A significant number have swung Biden's way. Just some initial thoughts on the presidency, Kevin.
Yeah, and let's not forget that the reason that a lot of these mail-in ballots are being counted so many days after the election is because Republicans sued in many of these states.
Yes.
And Republican legislatures changed the rules so that they couldn't start counting until Election Day.
Right.
Several of them, or maybe the day before Election Day. But,
yeah,
unlike here in Washington State, where they've been counting ballots as they came in.
Yep.
Right. And it was perfectly secure. No information leaked about how the ballots were going. But in many other states, that was just simply not allowed. Right. So they had no choice but to count all these. They could have had the vast majority of those ballots, counted and announced immediately at 8 o'clock on election night.
Right.
But they chose not to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And so here's where we are with it.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a problem of their own making.
Yeah. And it's one of these pillars of democracy when we talk about voting here. This is going to be a very fraught time ahead, I know, for our country in discussing this. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. But I want to look back locally here, Kevin, and I'll start with Seattle Proposition 1, the Seattle Transportation Benefit District. Were Seattleites worried about taxing themselves for more bus service? Heck no. More than 80% of voters in favor of that. Maybe not too surprising. There was no formal opposition to this measure. But Kevin, I'm just thinking about this. After all that hand-wringing on the Seattle City Council, should this be a 0.01% sales tax increase or 0.015? They went with a higher number and they won big here. Yes, we're in a pandemic, but times are tight, certainly, but overwhelmingly, people were voting for a higher tax here. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, so, part of that may in fact be that it's smaller than the one it's replaced.
That's
right?
True.
Because there was a $60, car tab.
Yeah, it doesn't include that car tab piece. Right.
So, and in fact, now that, Initiative 976 has been thrown out by the state Supreme Court, we may in fact see this coming, the Seattle Council, go back to the voters again and say, hey, should we put a car tab on top of that?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because they can. Right.
Yeah.
And the $27 million a year on average that's going to come out of this over the next 6 years is super appreciated. That'll help. But there's a lot more needs that we have.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And by the way, when you just look at sort of the relative regressiveness of different taxes, right?
Yeah.
Sales tax, which is, what the one Prop 1 that just got approved is entirely is one of the most regressive taxes out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I know the
So-
council has its eye
So,
on that.
and you know, Seattle already has the most regressive tax system in the most, in the most regressive state in the United States, right? So they're itching for ways to make revenues, for the city more progressive. So
Right.
I would be shocked if they didn't come back and look at this and see what else they could do and stuff.
Yeah, and I know there's a council manic action too that could involve a car tab fee. So we're
A little
definitely
bit.
going to be keeping
A
tabs on that.
little
Not
bit.
much.
Not
Yeah.
at the $60 level.
No,
but-
$20 level. So that's something we'll be watching as well. Just working up to the county level here, Kevin. A similar story on the tax measure to support Harborview Medical Center and some renovations there. County's Prop 1, that nearly 80% of the vote as well. But I was really interested to see what is potentially a big shift for King County law enforcement, these measures to make the sheriff's position a selection of the King County executive, not elected by the people. We're talking Charter Amendments 5 and 6. I thought this was interesting because a number of police unions, locally and nationally here, poured $200,000 to the No campaign for this. Supporters only raised about $6,000, but it looks like this is going through here. This is potentially a big change.
It is a big change. And, on the sheriff, we should keep in mind that it used to be up until 1996 an appointed position.
Yep.
And then through, a measure exactly like this one, they flipped it to being elected, right? And now they flipped it back, right? But putting, and that's Amendment 5. And Amendment 6 is the one that basically lets the county council write the job description of the sheriff.
Yeah, they have a lot more control over it now. Yeah.
So, I really sort of thought of those as a matching pair, right?
Yeah.
Where the voters are being asked, do you want to give the county council the ability to go make a bunch of changes pretty quickly in order to drive police reform?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sure looks like the voters of King County are saying, yeah, we want you guys to go do that, right?
Yeah.
And if you believe that the county council, it's the right organization to go do that.
Yes. Right.
And you believe in what they're going to do, this is great,
Yeah.
You have to temper a little bit by really realizing that, they can undo their changes.
That's
using
true.
the same mechanism.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This isn't a one-off deal, right?
Yeah.
This is charter amendments can change all that power to appoint the sheriff and to write the job description for the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
Is now in the hands of the county council and the county executive, and it doesn't have to go back to a vote of the people to change it.
Right. And that's the big deal here, because I know supporters of this were saying this is a measure through which we're going to get more national candidates for the job here. It was interesting to me to see voters actually give up their right to vote on this position here. So an interesting piece ahead there for the county. On the state level, I know some spirited grassroots campaign to stop the legislature's work on sex education. That failed as Referendum 90 passed. Maya Espinoza, that No to Sex Ed, big part of her platform in a bid for school superintendent. She didn't make the cut here. Really a blue wave statewide we're talking about in this election, increasing the Democrat majorities in the House and Senate at the state level. But I want to bring it back here locally, Kevin. With the uncertainty, I guess we'll call it, over the presidential vote at this point, I feel like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop on large-scale protests in the Seattle area. Is the SPD ready for it? I know Chief Diaz has been talking about new ways to approach crowd control or whatever else. Have we seen over the past couple of weeks, and there has been plenty of activity, certainly up on Capitol Hill when it comes to protests, if these protests start getting bigger, is SPD ready for that? Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, the interim Chief Diaz has set up basically the responsibility for protest response in a very, what he calls his community response team.
Yes, that's right.
Being sort of precinct by precinct across the city. There's one group that's spearheading, which, to the extent that he's also trying to drive kind of faster changes and in their policies for doing this is probably a good thing. They've got a lot of training to push out to a lot of officers, because it involves a lot of officers to respond to these correctly, to make sure everybody's really on the same page on how to do this. So far, largely it seems to be working. What they seem to be doing more, at least sort of anecdotally, is trying to do more arrests of individuals in crowds that are misbehaving, right? So rather than when a protest, when there are a small number of people in a protest that turn violent, saying, okay, we're declaring this to be an unlawful assembly or a riot, and everybody must disperse. Much more surgical about going and saying, okay, we're going to pull out of this crowd the real misbehaviors.
Try to pinpoint the people who are breaking the windows or whatever else. Make those arrests in that smaller area rather than shutting the entire thing down. Keep going.
And we still have a small number of data points on that. We saw just a few days ago, there was an incident on Capitol Hill where someone who's being arrested ended up in critical condition in
That's right.
Harborview. And as of, when we're recording this, there is still very unclear data as to what happened to that person and why they ended up in the hospital. Whether it was, there were different reports across the board about whether it was police actions, whether the person had a seizure. So, I'm withholding judgment on this one because I don't think sort of the data there is to be clear. But I think we're going to see, more, incidents on both sides, incidents where doing that, didn't further escalate tensions between the crowd and police. And we may see incidents where it goes wrong. And we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that incident you're talking about there specifically, certainly a test for the SPD, and I know they will be facing some more tests ahead. So thanks for that breakdown, Kevin. I'm going to move on to Now Hear This. Okay, so this is where we break down a soundbite from the past week, and here's one from Councilmember Teresa Mosqueda. She's the budget chair for the council. She's laying out the deadlines approaching the council when it comes to changing her budget balancing package, which she's set to come out with on the 10th of November. So we're talking about those good old Form Cs, as they're called. Form A, hey, I've got an idea. Form B, okay, now this bill has at least 3 sponsors. Form C, all right, you want to make some changes to the budget chair's balancing package? You're going to have to figure out some extra math here, cuts to things or more income to make that work. Here's Councilmember Mosqueda breaking it down.
The deadline for Form Cs to change the balancing package is 10 a.m. on Thursday, November 12th. And any proposal that increases appropriations at that time must be self-balancing.
Okay, so Kevin, we're recording the show just before the budget chair of the council lays out her balancing proposal on November 10th. And this is the time the council members are going to be considering a lot of these different changes here. Tell us where we are, because not a ton of meetings, public meetings right now, but a lot of work certainly going on behind the scenes as council members try to figure out these Form Cs.
Right. At the beginning of last week, council members got an update on revenues, and there was actually some good news.
Good news there, right?
But even if there wasn't good news, basically it gives the budget chair Mosqueda sort of a hard target to hit. Here's how much money you have to spend. Right. And then from there, she looks at all the Form Bs and said, okay, which of the, and the relative priorities based upon what council members said in co-sponsoring them, and puts together a package that balances. And she's going to deliver that on Tuesday. And from there, the council members can make, further changes. Councilmember Sawant has already said she is going to, put back in some of the things that didn't make the cut. There's some things that didn't even get really, a full hearing as Form Bs because she couldn't find 2 sponsors.
That's right.
There's going to be some disappointments and other things. What we saw from the Form Bs was a mix of earmarks for district-based things and, personal pet projects of council members, as well as some bigger issues around community safety and police and transportation and all that.
Homelessness, sure.
And so, a few of those are going to go a second round. But, after Tuesday, after the balancing package is out there, anything that anybody proposes has to be self-balancing. So if you're going to spend more money, they got to say where that money is going to come from. And that's going to be a challenge.
Let me dive into one of those issues when you talk about community building, community safety here too. This Black Brilliance Research Project, you wrote about this on SCC Insight. This is a group made up of Decriminalize Seattle, King County Equity. Now, the council asked them through a participatory budgeting process, make some recommendations, and we do have this preliminary report now. Kevin, your thoughts about this study and the recommendations that we're seeing there?
So King County Equity Now and Decriminalize Seattle were asked by the City Council to put together this participatory budgeting process, which is really going to have much more of an effect on 2022 budget. So they're going to be spending the first part of this coming year, kind of running that whole process so that their hopes are by next fall when they're writing the 2022 budget, the City Council will have lots of great input and, has the time to really sort of do all the hard things they need to do to make that happen.
These are big changes we're talking about potentially.
So what they got last week was a preliminary report, right, from the, the research that these groups have been doing. And, you can think of this research as qualitative research, as opposed to quantitative, right? They haven't spelled out their methodology. They haven't, sort of given numbers behind this is the number of people reached. Here's the percentage of people in the community who believe this is the priority, or whatever. So it's
qualitative. They are doing the outreach.
It's first impression, and qualitative research is important, right? If you talk in social science research circles, it's important. And if you think of the participatory budgeting process as sort of the ultimate quantitative research effort, right?
Okay.
Let's get a bunch of people to kind of vote, literally vote on what they
numbers,
think is most important, right? Then what the qualitative research does is before that, it tells you what issues you need to be asking people to vote on.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So they got a bunch of input on that.
Of course.
Is it really, tight enough that they're going to be able to, the city council is going to be able to use it to make a ton of like important changes now in 2021 budget?
Yeah.
Nah, not really.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's, it's a little bit of ammunition for some of the things they want to push for, and we'll kind of see how it goes from there.
At least it provides a certain roadmap here. I wanted to talk about one last budget wrinkle here, Kevin, when it comes to police funding, perhaps. The city's talking about changing its approach to bargaining with police unions. Councilmember Herbold, Mayor Durkin talking about this last week. So before, it was just the Office of Police Accountability was advising the city. Now all three of the city's accountability groups, the OPA and the Office of the Inspector General, the OIG, and the Community Policing Commission, the CPC, will be involved, as well as a council central staff member. What impact do you think this is going to have, Kevin? I know this is always a delicate process here, but now it sounds like the council is going to have more involvement, and the community potentially is going to have more involvement.
Yeah. Let's put a stark contrast here. So normally, when any contract, and including the SPOG and SPMA, which is the
two unions.
The unions. The SPMA is a union for the sergeants and lieutenants in SPD. When those two unions bargain with the city, usually it's the director of labor relations for the city, who's part of the executive branch, and somebody from the mayor's office sitting at the table bargaining with them, right?
Yes.
And they have to report to those two folks have to report to what's called the Labor Relations Policy Committee, which is 5 city council members and 3 representatives from the executive executive branch, from the mayor's office. So those 8 people basically set the priorities and the parameters for bargaining. And the labor relations director then goes and basically drives the bargaining at the table.
Okay.
So, they can, the labor relations policy committee and the mayor can go talk to whoever they want to talk to, but there aren't a lot of seats at the table when this is going on, right?
Okay.
That's how it's been run.
Yeah.
And now what they're saying is, and what you can see here is I think I interpret this as the city government really trying to present a united front.
Right. Council and mayor coming forward.
They know that they have some hard negotiations. There's a lot of stuff they want to ask for, and the unions are going to push back.
Of course.
And so they're trying to maximize the political capital that they have going into them, so they can really establish a united front. So they've got, more people at the table. City council is going to have a seat at the table, right?
Yeah.
And the OPA, OIG, and CPC may be sitting at the table.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
What they've said here is that the labor relations director can invite them to sit at the table if they want. Right. But they are formally advisors now on the process, and they will be in the loop as to how the negotiations going all the way through. Right.
Yeah.
So, and my guess is, at least, some of the time, one of them is going to be sitting at the table.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think to follow through on that process for sure.
And this is a big thing the CPC has wanted. They've really wanted to be able to sit at the table and sort of represent the community. What they haven't asked for, what lots of people have asked for, but what they haven't said they're going to do is open up, make the negotiations
completely
and what happens at the negotiation table public. Right. And transparent. And under state law, they really can't do that.
Right. And I just to give a quick background on this, Kevin, I think a lot of this stems from 2017. The council passes its big ordinance to make sure police are more accountable there. 2018, the mayor was very much in charge of these negotiations with the different police guild and the unions for the police. And I think a lot of people felt a little let down by that contract that came out of that in 2018. And I guess we're here at this point now. I want to make sure I set that out there.
Yeah. but a lot of that, a lot of the way those negotiations with SPOG turned out are because of state law.
Yeah.
And it's the other interesting thing going on right now, which is I actually think super important, really determine a lot of the impact of these changes, the impact of these next round of negotiations with both of these unions is, there's a lot of folks in the state legislature right now and the governor who are gearing up to push through some changes to police accountability. Right. Right now, state law mandates that SPOG, as a union for public safety civil service employees, has the right to arbitration. And
Yes.
arbitration has been a key issue in all
Absolutely.
this, right? So, that could change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. The governor has a lot more Democratic backers now in the House and Senate after this most recent election.
Right. So
we'll see where he goes
could
there.
change that law.
Yeah.
They could change the law and say that negotiations with public safety unions have to be open and transparent.
A lot still ahead with those police negotiations. We're going to keep an eye on them. And we're going to move on right now to what's next. Okay, so Mayor Jenny Durkan right now is trying to respond to some of the anger and frustration expressed by the Downtown Seattle Association and others about what they call a public health and public safety crisis in our parks. So the mayor is calling for a new clean city proposal. Some work already underway, she points out, but she's calling for about $5.6 million in new revenue to increase trash pickups, specifically around parks here. The mayor certainly is seeing that better looking revenue forecast, $30 million or so. And she's saying, all right, City Council, here's an idea of where to spend it. What do you make of this proposal, Kevin?
Yeah, so the bulk of the money, about $4 million of the money, would go to set up 4 new community clean teams, one for each of 4 quadrants of the city. And it'd be 14 to 16 people in each of them, a combination of Parks and Recreation, SDOT, and Seattle Public Utilities.
That's right.
To basically just 40 hours a week scour the city, looking to clean up stuff. So that's a bulk, and it seems like that would certainly help. I don't know if it's gonna solve the problem as a whole, but every little bit helps, and that's gonna be a big chunk of it. Beyond that, there's some stuff for parks to do. There's some specific parts of this Clean Cities initiative for litter abatement by SPU, for basically doubling the size of the what they call the purple bag program.
Yes, right.
Where SPU goes out to specific encampments.
That's right.
It'll change from 17 of them to 34 of them. And they distribute purple garbage bags. And the folks living there can sort of collect up the garbage, and SPU will come through and just pick up all those bags. Just to sort of reduce the amount of garbage that's collecting there. More needle disposal, infrastructure, a graffiti team going around.
Graffiti rangers are going to be increased.
Graffiti rangers, they'll increase it by about 20%. So there's a variety of different things. It's not one thing, it's a bunch of things. But again, the bulk of it is these 4 teams, one per quadrant of the city. It's only asking for funding for 4 months in 2021. So, we'll see what happens from there. But
what impact is it going to have? I wanted to make sure we went down that path.
It'll if it works, it'll certainly, clean up a lot of the garbage. And a lot of the other sort of public health hazards.
Not a complete answer to what the DSA was looking for, I don't think, but a start.
We're stuck at the moment because we're still in this COVID pandemic. And that means that, we're trading off in one way, the public health risks of having a homeless population living in parks and streets and green belts and things like that, versus the public health risks of having a homeless population that's constantly churning around the city and moving from place to place, and potentially
what impact would that have?
Around. So what the CDC has said is the lower risk is to leave them in place. So then this is sort of in response to that, say, okay, if we're going to follow the CDC advice and not push these people around the city, let's really up our investment in cleaning up.
I would have to think the council is going to take a hard look at this and probably be supportive of it. So we'll watch that throughout this budget process and into next year as well. As we start to wrap up the podcast here, I always lean on Kevin's mad baking skills for some advice about coffee break treats. So here is your challenge this week, my man. We're talking about Halloween candy. Bunch left over, right? So we had a big run, hit our house in between 5 and 6. I was freaked out. I was like, I got to get some more candy. Got more candy. I haven't even opened this bag of peanut butter cups here. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want these in the house, but office isn't really open, so I can't just throw them on the desk there and hope that, people will take care of it that way. I don't really want to donate to the food bank. That's probably not too cool to be doing something like that. Not overly healthy. What do I do? Do I have any answers here for this leftover candy at the house? I need that baking cookie miracle thing to happen to me, Kevin. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think the answer is simple.
Oh, it is. Okay, good.
Yeah, you send the peanut butter cups to me.
Ah,
I love them.
why didn't I think
not
this
so
through?
much the other candy bars, but peanut
Yes.
butter cups. I'm all about the Reese's
I
peanut butter
see.
cups.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
So that and you know, all listeners out there, that's not true for, you know, don't all of you send me your Halloween candy. That would be bad. Right?
Yes.
You know,
right.
I'll just
right,
kind of
right.
like blow up and I won't fit in the, you know.
No, we don't want that. Yeah.
None of us want that. My doctor definitely does not want that. But,
No,
you know,
no.
with
Okay.
your bag of leftover peanut butter cups, yeah,
I see.
I'll just take care of that.
I see. Okay. All right. I didn't know the answer was that simple, but
It's
now
simple,
I know.
really.
As always, Kevin, I appreciate the input on public affairs and now some new knowledge in terms of candy consumption. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Always, as always. All right. The next time, folks, you want to know what's happening in local politics, give us a listen on Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Find out what's brewing here. Subscribe on iTunes or Spotify. Please support us on Patreon if you like what you're hearing. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your support. Thanks also to everybody watching on Converge Media. We appreciate you too, and we will see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2020.